presentation how to accelerate cloud adoption in Europe, because even though we've been on the cloud journey for maybe 10 years now, we are still at the very beginning of the cloud journey, which keeps puzzling me, because I've been looking at the cloud market for at least 6 years for IDC, and I head up IDC's cloud research for Europe, so I've been following how European organizations have been moving towards the cloud for at least 6 years now, and even though it's been quite a long time, we are still beginning, and that's really interesting. But to start with, I want to set the scene by talking about the macroeconomic environment that we are working in at the moment. So we see a lot of changes in the environmental regulations. We see inflationary pressures, and we've asked 100 CIOs across Europe what the biggest challenges for them are when we gave them this list around COVID or geopolitical risks and interventions. And actually what they said is the talent skills gap is the biggest challenge for them at the moment. Cyber security threats, of course, have increased a lot in the last months because of the war in Ukraine. But the skills gap was the one that they cited in January when we did this research. I also want to put in perspective, how we see the IT industry evolving. So what you can see here is the financial crisis in the first box, and then the pandemic in the second box. And in the financial crisis, we've seen that IT spending actually declined further than GDP growth. So companies were really saving or not spending on IT because they were really under pressure through the financial crisis. But then fast forward to 2020, 2021, what we see is that actually IT spending is holding up very well and even growing, whereas GDP again declined quite drastically. And the big change between 2008 and 2020 or 2021 is that organizations are now seeing IT as the solution to their problems, rather than just a cost that they can cut when they need to cut costs. And most of the growth that we have forecast here in the blue line is actually driven by cloud spending, because cloud is by far the fastest growing segment of the IT market. We see between 20 and 30% growth, depending on which cloud market we look at, or public cloud market we look at, and that is really driving this very high growth in the IT space. So we see a lot of investment in cloud technologies at the infrastructure layer, platform layer, and software as a service layer, but still we are at the beginning of this cloud journey. What we also found from interviewing these 100 CIOs across Europe is that they really want to accelerate the move to cloud. CEOs, so we are not talking about the IT function, but really about the business leadership of organizations. They have now realized that technology is the solution to many of the problems that they have in their organizations, and they really want to get more educated around technology, and they want to invest in technology, and specifically in cloud technologies, in order to accelerate the digital transformation of their organizations and develop new digital products and services and bring them to market faster. The second point here already is improving technology staff competencies and skills. So again, you see that the skills shortage is a massive problem for organizations, because once they have decided that digital transformation and the move to cloud is part of their major strategy, they of course want to hire people to build teams to execute on this strategy, and that's when they find that they can't go fast enough because they can't find the right people. And we will talk much more about that in the skills panel just after this session. When we look at what does a digitally transformed organization look like, then we have identified these 5 aspects that we see all organizations working on. So they want to become data-driven, and data is really going to be the key architectural design point for future infrastructures. So it's less about the infrastructure itself, but it's really about how can you support the data needs of the organization. It's fueled by innovation. So after a couple of years where there was a lot of focus on efficiency and cost saving during the pandemic, we see that organizations are really shifting gears into innovation and how to deliver this digital innovation, these new digital products and services is a key task for these organizations in Europe. But then also still a focus on digital resiliency. So how can you survive unforeseen events like a pandemic, for example? How can you prepare for the next big disruption that for sure is going to come? We don't know what it is, but we know something is going to come. Building that into the platform is very important as well. And then we see that these organizations are very ecosystem-centric. So we are moving away from one organization competing against a couple of others, but we are really moving to this ecosystem-centric approach where organizations are joining ecosystems, they want to work with ecosystems, and they want to exchange data across ecosystems. And how can they do that? And the cloud is really the best platform to enable these ecosystem-centric business models. So platform-enabled, cloud platform-enabled, I would say. I'm a little bit biased because I look at cloud all day long. But these platform-enabled businesses are, or the platform is really the foundation for this new digital business. But if we do a reality check and see where are organizations on this cloud journey, then when we ask organizations, where are you on this continuum that ranges from exclusively on-premise to exclusively in the public cloud, then we see that organizations are still primarily on-premises, so in their own data centers, right? 2% said that they are exclusively in the public cloud. Many organizations have a mix or a balanced approach to cloud, and we actually see that there's a big shift from these very rigid cloud-first strategies where organizations want to push everything into the cloud towards a more sophisticated workload-first or application-first approach where they really take an assessment of their application needs, their data needs, and then they decide where this application should be best placed. Is it in a public cloud, or is it in a hosted environment, or is it in their own data center? So this balanced approach, I think, is the right strategy for the future. We could also call it workload first or application first approach, which is currently done by around 30% of organizations. But the majority is still on premises, right? So that's why I'm saying we're still at the beginning of the cloud journey, because we see, of course, very advanced use cases built on cloud, and we see digital native organizations and cloud native organizations who are really doing amazing stuff. But if you look at the whole market, then the majority is still taking the first steps into the cloud. If we then stretch this whole cloud discussion a little bit further to the edge, and I know that's a topic that you like a lot, then what we see as well is that edge is actually the fastest growing part of the market. So we have asked these questions for several years, and we've gone from infrastructure spending being the majority or being in majority dedicated to the data center towards slowly but surely moving more and more to the public cloud. So that has been kind of a steady evolutionary change. But then 2 years ago we started to ask about edge in this, and the edge part has grown from 9% to 17% in just 2 years. So we've seen a massive jump in terms of edge investments as being part of the infrastructure budget. And we are not even, we don't even have a fully built out edge infrastructure in place. So we expect that this is going to grow even faster than what we've seen before. But we also see that the core data center spending is not going away, right? So we see that there is still a very significant investment in the core data center and the secondary data centers. Then if we look at how do organizations get into the cloud, then there are different strategies that organizations can use. They can either stay on premises or retire their applications and do something completely new, or they can do a lift and shift, which has for many organizations been the first step into the cloud, or the easy on-ramp into the cloud. But in my opinion, it's not the most efficient strategy how to get into the cloud, because you're not getting the cost savings, you're not getting the efficiencies, the agility necessarily if you just do a lift and shift. If you really want to see cloud as a transformational technology, then you need to go further. And what I really like about this chart is that 24% of organizations are already taking this step further. So they understand that they need to modernize their applications first, and then they can move them into the cloud so that they are a better fit for the cloud. And then they can get better cost savings as well. 11% are taking like a very brave approach about refactoring and re-architecting their applications, which takes longer but has ultimately the better business benefits. And then 8% are currently saying that they are replacing their business applications with the software as a service solution. And this view is a very IT manager view. So if we had asked more business executives, probably the SaaS part would be higher. But if we asked IT managers primarily for this survey, and they, of course, they don't necessarily see the migrations into software as a service to the same extent. What's also interesting here is that 4% say they're moving applications back to on-prem. And we see that as a part of a learning curve or an iterative cycle where especially organizations who had a very strong cloud-first strategy, they are then saying, well, maybe we moved some business applications into the public cloud that were not a good fit, we bring them back. Right? Or now we understand how this application works in this new infrastructure and we can run it more cost effectively on-prem. So we see a little bit of that. It's not a massive exodus from public cloud, but it's part of a learning curve or an iterative process that organizations are going through. We are also looking at what percentage of applications is running in containers. And I've put here like a 50% wall actually on the background of the slide, because I think it's important to think about if we wanted to have more than 50% of our applications and data in the cloud, what would that look like? What do we need to put in place in order to achieve that? And so the goal for me, maybe not as a, that everyone has to move 50% of applications into the cloud, but as a challenge to think about what would it take to move 50% of our data and applications to the cloud. I think it's interesting to think about it, because when you move beyond 50%, then it's not just about a technology change, but it's really about an organizational change, a cultural change, the skills change, and it requires much more than understanding the technology. But if we do the reality check, what percentage of applications is running in containers? 5% of organizations say they have more than 50% of their applications today in containers. Right? So again, we are very much at the beginning of this journey. But already 28% are at about a quarter, which I think is very good. I thought it wouldn't be that high. So we see organizations embracing new technologies and pushing in this direction. We also asked about why cloud migrations fail, because I think it's important to understand what are the stumbling blocks on the road into the cloud. And performance and reliability issues are actually the number one stumbling block, and this is all about networking. So getting the network right, getting connectivity right, and including that in the cloud journey from the beginning is also very important, because the networking team for some reason is usually not included into the cloud migration plans early on, and that gets back to organizations later in the process when they have made their beautiful cloud migrations, but then the users find that the performance of the applications is actually not what they expected or what they're used to, and then they don't like them. Right? They reject the new cloud solutions, and that's of course not what we want. So lack of user acceptance of these new cloud tools and services is the other big challenge, sometimes related to performance, sometimes related to lack of training, so organizations need to work on that as well. It's not enough to just say, here you go, here's your new wonderful cloud solution, but you really need to tell people how to use it, what the benefits are, so that they embrace it and accept it and use it. And then of course a big problem is lack of integration. So how do you integrate either between different clouds or back to your on-premise systems? Because if you can't integrate back into your systems, then it's not working, you don't have access to the right data, and you can't really be productive. Another problem is lack of standards, and that's one of the things that, for example, our colleagues from the Gaia X Foundation are working on, and I know that there are a lot of movements in the industry to define these standards, to make it easier to switch between clouds or port workloads between clouds, and just in general have a more homogeneous infrastructure and avoid the lock-in situation. But of course, developing standards takes a long time because everyone wants to give their inputs and have different ideas about what the standards should look like. So standards notoriously are coming to market with a delay in terms of where customers are and what they want to adopt. Then again, we have skills shortage. 20% of organizations say skills shortage is the main reason why their cloud migrations have failed. And that is, of course, a big issue here in Europe, and something that I know that the industry collectively is working on. And then digital sovereignty concerns was on the list for the first time with 14% of organizations. And that survey was done in July, August last year. So that's just when the digital sovereignty debate started to take off in Europe. When we repeat the survey this year, I expect this number actually to be higher. But this is kind of an early indication of where organizations are. When organizations are moving into the cloud, they have to deal with a lot of complexity. And especially in Europe, organizations seem to pay the cost of complexity in order to have a multi-cloud strategy. So the avoidance of lock-in is very important for European organizations, and they actually purposefully almost move into this complex situation of using many cloud services in order to have more freedom and sovereignty of their cloud strategy. So in order to deal with this complexity, at some point in the cloud journey, they will need to change their organization, and they will need to put in place something like a cloud center of excellence. If they call it cloud center of excellence or something else, they can call it what they want, but they need to bundle their resources. They need a place of focus in the organization to change the culture, implement these new ways of working, and also get the security frameworks right and put everything in place. And currently, about half of European organizations have at least partially adopted a cloud center of excellence. Actually, only about 34% have, or 18%, sorry, have fully adopted a cloud center of excellence in Europe at the moment. So again, that's a sign of the maturity or not maturity of European organizations, that they are still kind of working through the implications also on the organizational structure and culture. And you can see there are huge differences across the European market where, for example, in the Nordics, surprisingly, adoption of Cloud Center of Excellence is not very high. In the UK, we would have expected that it's quite high because they are quite advanced in their cloud usage. So you can see significant differences across Europe. When we asked what are the key tasks of this Cloud Center of Excellence, then we see that it's still very much technology focused, so focused on performance, security, but also already on aligning business and cloud strategy. What's really interesting is to look at these results by country, because in some countries, like for example the Netherlands, they really use their Cloud Center of Excellence to change their culture, to implement DevOps methodologies, so they're really pushing or using their Cloud Center of Excellence to push a change in the organization, whereas in other countries they are more focused on the more technical aspects of the Cloud Center of Excellence, which I think is the first step when you establish it, but then you need to go beyond, and you also need to ensure that the Cloud Center of Excellence helps to drive this cultural change. Then one of the key points for me is also to understand where organizations are in terms of implementing these 12 capabilities that we have identified as key capabilities in order to be successful in the cloud. So they range from monitoring and optimization, because if you move to a cloud strategy, then of course you need much higher levels of automation. Because you want to operate like a cloud, even though you operate it yourself or you give it to a service provider. You need digital security and trust. So if your customers don't trust your IT solutions or your digital products and services, you will not be successful. You need access to real-time data. And we have identified these 12 parameters that we think that customers need to put in place and need to build capabilities in. But as you can see, that even for the most adopted capability, we are at 28% of organizations saying, yes, we are doing this and we are good at it. So again, there's still a long way to go in building the capabilities and skills to fully embrace cloud. So just some advice for technology leaders, or really for the industry, I think as a whole, is that if we want to crush the 50% wall, just as a thought experiment, we need to think about cloud as a truly transformational platform. So it's not just somebody else's technology that we are using, but it's something that if we really embrace it, then it can help us to transform the business completely, because suddenly we have a much higher level of agility, we can react to customer demands much faster, we can have a much faster time to market in our products and services, but it requires not just a technology change, but really an organizational change, a cultural change. You need to hire new skills, or you need to build new skills in the organization, which takes time. Right? So that's also why we are not yet fully done with cloud, because if you really want to use it for transformation, it will take a long time, because you need to rebuild your organization basically to fully take advantage. And that's what many organizations find at the moment, where they say, okay, we've done a few projects in the cloud, it's really cool, but it's like this team over here and this team over there. If we want to take it to scale, now we need to do the hard work. And that's where they are kind of stuck. They need to take the next step on the stairs, and it takes a little bit of time. So implementing a new culture, that you can call it the DevSecOps culture or SecDevOps, or however you want to put these names together, and also new organizational structures like the Cloud Center of Excellence are really important. But that's where you need to have change management programs in place, you need to have training in place for employees, and that takes time. And then the last thing is, for me, is that it's really the significant change in terms of cloud strategy. I heard a few people say yesterday we have a cloud-first strategy, but I'm also seeing that organizations are moving away from a cloud-first strategy, because it's sometimes too rigid, because there are workloads that are not a good fit for cloud. And if you push them into the cloud, it will be more costly and not bring the performance that you need. So I think the next step in terms of developing a strategy is really about understanding the requirements application by application and data set by data set, and then have a very hybrid and multi-cloud approach rather than a single cloud approach. So with that, I want to thank you for your attention, and I look forward to discussing skills with my fellow panelists in just a moment. Thank you very much.